What if the most powerful woman in the company was once just the receptionist? No one noticed. She was never supposed to be invited, never supposed to speak. But one fake date turned into a war room of truth. A child's voice changed the boardroom forever, and a single sentence from a 6-year-old, it shattered everything. Stay till the end, because this story isn't about love. It's about recognition, redemption, and the kind of woman who walks back in, but this time on her own terms. If that hit you, don't scroll. Hit subscribe so you never miss another story that flips the script. Drop a comment below. Have you ever been underestimated like Emma? And share this with someone who needs to be reminded that sometimes the person who changes everything starts by holding the door open. It was a Tuesday morning that looked like every other one, except it wasn't. Emma Lynn knelt on the marble floor of the lobby, carefully helping a little boy line up pieces of a dinosaur puzzle. "This one's his tail, Noah," she whispered gently, pointing to a curved green piece. Noah didn't say a word. He never did. He just nodded, pushing the puzzle piece into place and watching her with those wide, cautious eyes. He was 6, smart, quiet, and clearly carrying more weight than any kid should. Emma, on the other hand, was 26, wearing a name tag she wasn't proud of and heels that pinched. She was just the temporary receptionist filling in at Cole & Mercer for 2 weeks, maybe 3. She wasn't supposed to be near the executive floor, and she definitely wasn't supposed to be bonding with the CEO's son. But fate doesn't care about titles. A sharp voice sliced through the air like cold wind through glass. "Miss Lynn." Emma turned and saw Adrian Cole standing at the edge of the lobby like a well-dressed storm cloud. Black suit, perfectly tied navy blue tie, not a speck of dust on his Italian shoes. He checked his watch, Rolex obviously, and didn't bother with a smile. Adrian Cole never smiled. "Sir," she asked, standing quickly, her voice catching in her throat. "You're coming with me tonight." There was a pause. Emma blinked. I'm sorry," I said. Adrian stepped closer, tone unreadable. "You're attending tonight's summit with me. The executive secretary was in a car accident this morning. I need a replacement. You're available." Emma's jaw nearly dropped. I'm just a temp." "Exactly." He adjusted his cufflinks. "No one will expect you to say anything." A beat of silence passed between them. "You don't even know if I own a dress." "I already sent someone to deliver one to your apartment," he replied flat, "along with shoes and accessories. My driver will pick you up at 6 hours. Her eyes narrowed, more confused than insulted. "Wait, that's tonight?" "Yes. In New York. Global Impact Finance Forum, West Tower Ballroom." He glanced at her like this was standard procedure. "It's not optional." She folded her arms, trying to hold her ground. "Why me?" "Because you're already here, and I don't have time for interviews." He turned to leave like the conversation was finished. Emma didn't move. "You think you can just order people around like it's a DoorDash delivery?" Adrian stopped mid-stride. Slowly, he turned his head, his eyes sharp as glass. "Miss Lynn, you'll find that I rarely ask, I state, and I solve problems quickly. You being here tonight solves one. That's all this is." There was no flirtation, no softness, just cold, clean corporate logic. Emma stared at him. "You don't even know me. I know your resume, and I know you're good with my son." That last line hit her like a dart. She looked down at Noah, who was now clutching the corner of her blouse like a kitten holding onto a ledge. "And you think that qualifies me for a global finance summit?" Adrian didn't blink. "I think that qualifies you to sit in a chair, smile politely, and not spill champagne." Emma scoffed. "You really know how to charm a girl." "I don't need charm," he said flat. "I need efficiency." Then, without waiting for her reply, he turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing like a countdown clock in the lobby. Emma stood frozen, mouth slightly open as Noah tugged gently at her hand. "Are you going out with Daddy?" he asked, voice barely a whisper. She looked down at the little boy's round face. The puzzle was half finished beside him. "Looks like it, buddy," she said softly, forcing a smile. "But what about the dinosaur?" Emma knelt beside him, brushing a stray piece of hair behind her ear. "The dinosaur's going to have to wait. Tonight, I guess I'm going to be a princess." Noah gave a tiny smile, the kind that broke hearts and healed them in the same second. "But Emma, She was anything but calm. Inside, she was burning. Who the hell did this guy think he was, throwing orders like confetti? Choosing her like picking a pen off a desk. No explanation, no request, just a straight-up command like she was some kind of backup USB. She wasn't going to take it. At least, not without pushing back. But part of her, a part she hadn't heard from in a long time, felt alive. Challenged, like this moment could be something, a test, a door, maybe even the start of a fight worth fighting. She looked at her reflection in the polished marble floor. This wasn't part of the job, but maybe it was the start of something bigger than any job she'd ever had. Emma stood in front of the full-length mirror, staring at the woman she barely recognized. The black dress fit like it had been tailored to her bones, elegant, sharp, unapologetic. Her hair was pinned in a way that made her neck look longer, more poised. But her eyes, they were still Emma's, cautious, calculating, waiting for the floor to drop. At exactly 6:00 p.m., a sleek black SUV pulled up outside her tiny studio apartment in Queens. The driver didn't say much, just held the door open and handed her a sleek badge that read Global Impact Finance Forum, Guest. She held it like it might explode. By 9:00 p.m., they were standing in front of the West Tower Ballroom in downtown Manhattan, the kind of venue with golden chandeliers, men in tuxedos, and women whose heels could stab through concrete. Adrian Cole, walking beside her, looked like he belonged to this world. He barely glanced at the doormen, didn't flinch when the cameras flashed. His voice was as crisp as his jacket. "Just smile," he said under his breath, "and don't say a word." Emma shot him a look. "You really know how to make a girl feel welcome." He didn't respond. He just handed their invitations to the host and walked in like he owned the place. Maybe he did. Inside, the air smelled like money and old wine. Glass clinking. Deals being whispered behind diamond bracelets. Billionaires talking about impact like it was a marketing campaign. Emma felt her throat tighten. She didn't belong here. She knew it. Everyone else probably knew it too. They moved from one group to the next. Adrian introduced her only once, and when he did, it was vague. "This is Emma. That's it. No title, no last name." She smiled. She didn't say a word. Exactly what he asked for, until it happened. They were standing near the back of the room when a silver-haired man with a British accent turned toward her, smiling warmly. "And you must be the director of strategy," he said, extending his hand. "It's such a pleasure." Emma blinked. "Excuse me." Adrian stepped forward to clarify, but she cut him off fast. She took the man's hand with a smile so calm it could slice steel. "I'm honored, sir," she said, "though I believe strategy is useless without accountability." The man raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Oh," Emma nodded, her voice steady but full of quiet fire. "What's the point of revenue forecasts if the people building the products can't afford a sandwich? Data doesn't feed hungry kids. Spreadsheets don't hug anyone when rent's due." Silence. A strange one. The kind that spreads like a crack in glass. Across the circle, someone set their wine down. Another leaned in. A woman in a green gown gave a small, thoughtful nod. Even Adrian looked at her, really looked like he wasn't sure what had just happened. Emma smiled, soft but firm. "Strategy should come with a spine, sir, and a heart." The silver-haired man chuckled. Not insulted, impressed. "Well said." And just like that, the mood shifted. They weren't looking at her like a secretary anymore. They were listening. They were curious. And Adrian? He stood frozen for a moment, jaw tight, but didn't interrupt. Because how could he? She'd just outplayed the whole room with a 30-second monologue that wasn't in anyone's script. As they moved away from the group, he leaned close, his voice low. "What was that?" Emma didn't look at him. "You told me not to speak." He exhaled hard. "And you spoke anyway." "Yeah," she said, picking up a glass of champagne. "Guess I'm not great at taking orders." He didn't smile, but something in his jaw relaxed, maybe just a little. The rest of the night moved like water through a tight pipe. Tension, glances, more conversations where people asked her questions, and somehow she always had answers. Not polished ones, but honest, smart, real. When they stepped out into the cold night, Emma finally exhaled. "You okay?" Adrian asked, as the driver opened the door. She shrugged, eyes forward. I just went to battle in a borrowed dress. I'm fine. He opened his mouth like he wanted to say something, but he didn't. Instead, he held the door. She got in. They drove in silence most of the way, until Noah came up. He's more comfortable around you than anyone I've seen, Adrian said, suddenly staring out the window. Emma looked at him. Maybe he just needs someone who doesn't expect him to be perfect. Another pause. Adrian turned toward her, his expression unreadable but softer. You threw me off in there. Good, she said. Someone should. They stopped in front of her apartment. She reached for the door handle, but he spoke again. Emma, she paused. I need you to pretend to be my partner for 2 months. Just appearances, events, no more surprises like tonight. She slowly turned to face him. Why me? Because you're the only one in the last 6 years who didn't try to impress me. Silence stretched. Emma tilted her head. You're serious? Yes. And what do I get? You get paid. Well, and you get to keep saying things that terrify billionaires. That one made her laugh. She didn't want to, but it slipped out. Then she looked him square in the eye. One condition, which is I don't fake anything. If I speak, it's because I have something to say, not because you need a prop. Adrian nodded slowly. Deal. Emma opened the door. I'll think about it. Then she stepped out, heels clicking against the sidewalk like punctuation. Adrian watched her go, this strange woman who came from nowhere, who wore borrowed heels and knocked billionaires back on their heels with one sentence. He didn't know what to make of her, but something told him. This was only the beginning. 3 days after the summit, Emma found herself standing in a fitting room again. This time not because she was forced to. She had said yes, to 2 months, to pretending, to walking into a world where everything was polished, branded, and timed to the second. And all she had was instinct honesty and a stubborn refusal to be anyone's prop. The contract came with rules. Lots of them. Appear at corporate events as my partner. No romantic implication required. Maintain discretion. Do not engage in business matters unless asked. She rolled her eyes at that last one. Still, the money was good enough to clear her student debt and maybe help her mom move out of her crumbling apartment in Jersey. But Emma had a few rules of her own. No orders outside of events. No speaking to me like I work for you. And stay away from my kid if you don't know how to talk to him. Adrian didn't argue. He just nodded once, like he'd just signed a merger deal with a hurricane in heels. The first event was a rooftop fundraiser in Soho. Emma wore navy. Adrian wore black. They looked like chess pieces that didn't belong on the same board, but somehow no one questioned it. People smiled at them. Whispers followed. That's Adrian Cole's new partner. She's different. Is she an HR? A consultant? Emma just smiled and didn't answer. But she watched everything. Who talked to whom? Who lied politely? Who smiled only when cameras were nearby? And how Adrian moved like a ghost, with power present but untouched. Until Noah came running in, holding a paper robot. Miss Emma. Look what I made. The room turned. A few execs looked confused. Some whispered. But Emma dropped to one knee, grinning. That's incredible, buddy. Is this a robot lawyer or a robot chef? Noah giggled. He makes grilled cheese, best kind of robot. Adrian stood a few feet away watching. But this time, his eyes weren't cold. They were caught. Over the next 3 weeks, the appearances blurred together. Brunches with investors, silent auctions, tech expos. Emma wore the role well, better than anyone expected. Maybe better than Adrian wanted. At one private luncheon, a board member leaned over and asked her, So how long have you and Adrian been involved? Emma smiled politely. Long enough to call him out when he's wrong, and short enough to keep things interesting. The table laughed. Even Adrian's lips curved slightly. Later that night, as they left the building, Adrian asked, What does that even mean? Emma shrugged. Exactly what it sounds like. He didn't press further, but he looked at her longer than he should have. One Monday afternoon, while Emma was waiting for a driver to pick her up from Cole and Mercer HQ, she wandered into the employee break lounge. No one noticed her. They assumed she was someone important, and no one questions important in heels and silence. She overheard a junior associate whisper to a colleague, "My daughter got sick last week, and they cut my PTO by half. Said it was internal restructuring. I had to leave her alone just to meet a deadline." Emma's jaw clenched. She didn't say anything, not then. But that night, she opened her laptop and started typing. A 4-page memo, titled "Rebuilding Loyalty from the Ground Up." She outlined a simple idea: internal microgrants for employees dealing with childcare emergencies, emergency paid days without docking PTO, and mental health days without HR penalties, all backed by performance-based incentives. A benefit program designed for real people. She didn't tell Adrian, but she left the printed draft on his office desk. No name on it, no notes, just paper. She figured he'd toss it. He didn't. The next morning, he stormed into the meeting room with it in his hand. "Did you write this?" Emma glanced up from her coffee. "Do you see anyone else here? This?" He flipped through the pages. "This is actually good. Thanks. I mean, it's disruptive. It cuts into projected margins, but keeps your staff from quitting every 3 months." He went silent. Then, unexpectedly, he said, "HR never came up with this. Not once." Emma leaned back, arms crossed. Maybe because HR hasn't been late on rent while raising a kid. He stared at her, and for a moment she saw it, the mask crack. Not completely. Just enough. Over the next couple weeks, Adrian started sending her more files to glance at. Proposals, memos, budget drafts. She offered opinions, honest ones. He didn't always like them, but he listened. And Noah started talking. Full sentences. "Emma, why don't you and Dad live in the same house, Emma? Will you come to my school play? Emma, did you know? Dad can't cook anything except coffee." The little boy who once hid behind chairs now danced in living rooms, sang songs, drew pictures of 3 stick figures, not 2. Emma pretended not to notice that third stick figure had red heels, but Adrian did. He found one taped to his fridge one night. No one said anything, but he didn't throw it away. Of course it wasn't perfect. They had arguments. About her stepping out of line, about his tone, about her refusing to sit through boring meetings with fake smiles. "You agreed to this," he said one night, frustrated. "No, I agreed to be seen, not silenced." They stared each other down, then walked away in opposite directions, but they always circled back, because the lie they'd crafted. It was starting to feel like truth. Not in the public eye, but behind closed doors, in the stolen glances, in the moments when she'd adjust his tie without thinking, when he'd order her favorite tea without asking. It was a slow burn neither of them acknowledged, because once you say it out loud, it's real, and real is dangerous. The ballroom glowed in gold and glass, all surface, all shine. It was the biggest dinner of the quarter, packed with international partners, high-net investors, and press disguised as guests. Emma wore black satin and diamonds on loan, but her spine was the real thing, straight and steel. She'd been through 3 dinners, 2 forums, and 6 strategy briefings with Adrian Cole, and through all of them, she'd held her own. But tonight, something felt off. Adrian had been distant all day, more clipped than usual. No "how are you?" No sideways glances, just pure executive mode. Emma didn't mind the cold. She just hated the fake warmth. They walked in side by side, smiling for cameras. They took their seats at the head table. Adrian poured her a glass of water. He didn't speak. The guest next to her was Victor Lang, a hedge fund shark out of Miami. Mid-50s Rolex, the size of a small moon, and a grin that screamed money over manners. 10 minutes into the main course, he turned to Emma and said it, loud, too loud. So he chuckled, swirling his wine. "Where'd you learn to talk numbers like that? One of those fancy MBAs, or just picked it up behind the front desk?" The table froze. Forks paused midair. Emma blinked once. She could feel Adrian beside her, rigid, still silent. He didn't say a word, didn't laugh it off, didn't correct him, didn't defend her, nothing. Just air. Victor laughed again, clearly amused by his own punchline. "No offense, sweetheart. You're just not the usual crowd." Emma turned slowly, faced Victor, full on. Her voice was calm, precise. "I've worked since I was 16. I've cleaned motel bathrooms for minimum wage. I've poured coffee for people who never looked me in the eye. I've sold newspapers on subway trains in February, and I've wiped vomit off shoes in diners at 2 a.m. Her voice didn't shake. It sharpened. I didn't learn strategy in a classroom. I learned it trying to keep my lights on without selling my soul. The entire table went dead silent. I don't have an MBA, but I have a memory of what it feels like to be invisible, and that's something money can't teach. Victor looked like he'd been slapped politely. Emma stood. She didn't wait for dessert, didn't wait for Adrian to say something, anything. She just straightened her dress and walked out. No yelling, no tears, just a quiet storm leaving the building. Outside, the night hit her like a wall, crisp, bitter, honest. She kept walking, past the valet, past the photographers, past the image they had built together. Inside the ballroom, Adrian still hadn't moved. Not until a junior associate leaned in and whispered, "Sir, the press is watching." Then he blinked. Too late. By the time he reached the curb, Emma was already gone. Back at her apartment, she didn't cry. She opened a bottle of ginger ale, kicked off the heels that never fit, and sat on the edge of her bed like she had 100 nights before this. No texts, no calls. She stared at her phone, dared it to light up. Nothing. Somewhere in her chest, a door slammed shut. The next morning, the gossip pages had it, "The Cole couple." Cracks in the perfect picture. Some praised her for the speech. Others mocked her as a PR stunt gone rogue. But the one headline that hit hardest, "CEO silent as his partner is publicly humiliated, real power, or just pretend." Emma didn't care about the press. She cared about the silence. Adrian's silence. She had stood in rooms filled with men who thought her worth was in her waistline. But Adrian, he was supposed to know better. He had asked her to pretend. But somewhere along the way, they'd both forgotten which parts were fake. And now she remembered all of it. Back at Cole & Mercer, Adrian sat at his desk, the memo Emma had written now pinned beside a framed photo of Noah. He stared at it for a long time. The longer he looked, the worse it felt. He hadn't said a word. He should have said something, anything. But he didn't, because he was too focused on the deal, the press, the image. And now she was gone. And for the first time in years, Adrian Cole realized something terrifying. He'd built a billion-dollar empire by controlling everything, but lost the one thing he didn't know how to hold. Not because he wasn't smart, but because he didn't speak when it mattered. The silence after she left wasn't loud. It was worse than that. It was quiet, a kind of quiet that lingered behind closed doors in boardrooms, and especially in Adrian's penthouse apartment at 3:17 a.m., when even the city refused to make a sound. Emma was gone, and she didn't leave a note, a voicemail, or a dramatic goodbye. But she had left something, a small leather-bound notebook tucked under a stack of unread reports on his desk. He didn't notice it until the day after the gala. He flipped it open absent-mindedly, expecting a grocery list or maybe a forgotten to-do. What he found stopped him cold. The front page was labeled in clean, block handwriting, "Employee Children's Education Fund, Pilot Model Proposal." Inside were handwritten pages filled with charts, cost breakdowns, partner organizations, logistics, and rollout strategies. Pages of them. It wasn't a dream or a wish list. It was a plan. A real, concrete, fully researched program designed to give employees' kids, janitors, assistants, warehouse staff access to scholarships, mentorship, and after-school care. The margins included quotes from staff, suggestions from social workers, even notes from Emma's own conversations with parents. And on the last page, she wrote, "Because dignity shouldn't stop at the lobby." Adrian stared at it for a long time. He wasn't a man who got emotional, but his hands shook a little when he turned the page. That afternoon, he canceled 3 meetings, told his assistant to reroute his driver, didn't explain why. He had to see for himself. The community center was 2 miles off the subway line in East Harlem. Nothing fancy, just brick walls, a cracked parking lot, and a faded banner that read, "Future starts here." Inside, the receptionist looked up, surprised. "Can I help you?" Adrian cleared his throat. "I'm looking for Emma Lynn." The woman raised an eyebrow. "She hasn't been in this week." But if you're one of the donors, I can show you around. Donor. He didn't correct her. She led him through the center, a humble space filled with donated books, mismatched chairs, and kids chasing each other down the hallway. Laughter echoed through the cracked walls like sunlight slipping through blinds. In the back room, a teenage girl was painting a mural of a city skyline. A toddler crawled around her feet, chewing on a marker cap. "This place exists because of her," the receptionist said quietly. Emma didn't just show up once and smile for photos. She brought books every week, hosted workshops, stayed late to help moms fill out job applications. She's the reason we have heat this winter. Adrian looked around stunned. This was Emma's world, the one she never mentioned, the one he never asked about. She didn't need applause, the woman added. She just cared. He left the center, different than he entered. No cameras, no assistant, no press release, just guilt. He had been blind, busy counting numbers while Emma was out changing lives. She had offered him more than presence, she offered him vision, and he'd ignored it until it was too late, and worse. He stood beside her while someone tried to humiliate her, and he said nothing, not because he agreed, but because he was afraid. Afraid of what standing up would look like, what it would cost. But now he knew what silence had cost him instead. That night, back in his office, Adrian opened his laptop. He pulled up her proposal, reread every line. This time, he didn't skim. He studied. He opened a new document and began typing. Title: Emma Initiative, Company-Wide Rollout Plan. And at the very top, he wrote a single sentence. This company was built by people like her. It's time we acted like it. He didn't know if she'd ever forgive him. He didn't even know if she'd come back. But he knew one thing. The world needed more Emmas, and he wasn't going to let this company forget her name. 2 weeks after she walked out of that ballroom, the headlines hit every major business outlet. Colin Mercer launches nationwide community development initiative, led by former receptionist. At first, people thought it was a publicity stunt, another CEO trying to clean up a PR mess. But when the press release went live with Emma Lynn's name, not just attached, but leading the entire initiative, people stopped whispering and started paying attention. Because this wasn't fluff. This was real. Scholarship programs for employee families, on-site childcare, mental health coverage, paid family emergency leave, partnerships with grassroots community centers across the country. And the face of it all? Not Adrian. Not some brand ambassador. Emma. She walked into Colin Mercer headquarters on a Thursday morning. No cameras, no red carpet, just purpose. The receptionist blinked like she'd seen a ghost. Emma nodded once, calm, steady, unshakable. When the elevator doors opened, Adrian was already waiting. He didn't speak at first. He just looked at her. The woman he'd underestimated, misunderstood, and now needed more than any boardroom full of strategists. I read every page, he said quietly. She folded her arms. You better have. He gave a half smile, tight, humbled. The board approved full funding. The Emma Initiative goes live this quarter. I'll do it, she said, cutting him off. But not under your rules. Adrian tilted his head. Meaning I work. I don't perform, she said flatly. No more photo ops, no more galas, no more pretending to be your girlfriend. Understood. I build my own team. Done. And you don't use this project as a marketing shield. If I see one fake campaign or branded coffee mug, I walk. Adrian hesitated, then nodded. You have my word. Over the next few weeks, Emma didn't just lead, she transformed. She turned an empty wing on the 5th floor into a war room filled with social workers, policy experts, and people who had lived the struggles they were trying to fix. She brought in a former single mom to head childcare ops, a GED graduate turned programmer to run the mentorship platform. No titles, no suits, just results. And Adrian. He kept his distance respectfully. He showed up to meetings when asked, listened more than he spoke, watched from the sidelines as Emma built something that didn't just check boxes, it meant something. Noah visited her office twice a week. He brought her drawings, asked her to read stories, told her he was learning how to cook grilled cheese without burning the bottom. Emma smiled every time, but kept the boundaries firm. Work, purpose, no games. Then came the press event. 100 reporters, cameras, investors, employees. Adrian stood at the mic first. He thanked the staff, the partners, the team. Then he stepped aside. Now I'd like to introduce the mind, heart, and backbone of this entire project, Yashwash, Ms. Emma Lynn. Emma walked up to the podium in a charcoal blazer, not smiling for the cameras, but for the people watching who needed this to be real. She looked out at the room, took a breath. When I first started at this company, I sat behind the front desk. I answered phones. I got coffee. No one asked what I thought. A pause. The room held its breath. But behind that desk, I listened. I heard stories about sick kids, missed paychecks, impossible choices. And I realized something: corporations talk about impact, but forget their own employees. She held up the blueprint of the Emma Initiative. This is for them, for the people who show up early, stay late, and hold this place together without ever standing on this stage. This program isn't charity, it's justice. The applause was real, loud, long. And in the back of the room, Adrian didn't smile for the cameras. He just watched her, proud, and for the first time, maybe even grateful. Later that night, after the event, he knocked once on her office door. She didn't look up. I already said what I needed to say. I know, he said. I just wanted to say, thank you for coming back. Emma glanced at him. I didn't come back for you. I know that too. He hesitated, then said softer, but I'm glad you did. Emma closed her laptop. This was never about you, Adrian. It was about the people this company forgot. I know. She grabbed her coat. Before she left, she looked at him, not with resentment, not with warmth either. Just truth. You asked me to pretend once. Adrian nodded slowly. Well, she said, this is who I've really been the whole time. And then she walked out. But this time, not away from something, towards something that mattered. The room was bigger than anything Emma had ever stood in. A glass amphitheater overlooking the New York skyline. Hundreds of attendees, government leaders, tech giants, global nonprofits, cameras, spotlights, and her name, Emma Lynn, lit up across the massive screen behind the podium. The Global Human Capital Forum, the most prestigious platform of the year. And somehow this time, she wasn't there as an assistant or a silent guest. She was the keynote speaker. She stood just off stage, heart pounding so loud it drowned out the ambient music. Her palms were cold, her breath shallow, her mind racing. She wasn't nervous about the crowd. She was nervous about the boy in the front row. Noah. He sat between two staff members, feet swinging in little dress shoes, gripping a juice box too tightly for its own good. His eyes scanned the stage until they found her. He smiled so big it looked like it might break his face. Then, in the middle of everyone settling in, he stood up on his seat and yelled loud and proud, "Mommy Emma, you got this!" The whole room turned. There was a collective ripple of chuckles, gasps, whispers. Emma froze. She wasn't expecting that. She looked down at him wide-eyed, and then she turned to Adrian. He stood against the wall, arms crossed, dressed in the same custom suit he always wore. Except this time, his face had something new. A smile. Not polite, not professional. Real. It was the first time she'd ever seen it, and it undid her, right there on the edge of the spotlight. Emma swallowed the lump in her throat, blinked hard, and stepped onto the stage. The lights hit her like heat, but she didn't flinch. She walked straight to the podium, took a breath, and looked out at the sea of faces. Noah waved again. She smiled. Then she began. I'm not a CEO. I don't have a degree from Harvard. I never studied economics in Europe or closed a 7-figure deal before my morning coffee. A pause. But I do know how it feels to hold 3 jobs and still not afford childcare. I know what it's like to choose between rent and dinner. And I know what it means to be invisible until someone gives you a microphone. The room went still. She continued. I used to think I didn't belong in rooms like this. That if I didn't speak the language of finance or fit into a designer dress, my ideas didn't matter. Her voice didn't shake, but it carried. Then I learned something. The most powerful people in any company aren't always the ones with corner offices. They're the ones who clean after the meetings, watch your kids when you're running late, or answer your phone calls when no one else will. She took a breath. In those jobs, I learned how to lead, not with authority, but with empathy. She motioned to the side screen. It lit up with photos from the Emma Initiative, real employees, real families, kids smiling at new desks, after-school programs launching in small towns. This project isn't about charity. It's about changing the math, shifting the bottom line to include human value. The applause started low, then grew. People were standing now. Some clapped with emotion, others with conviction, a few with tears. And in the front row, Noah was clapping the loudest. Emma caught his eye. Her lips trembled. She couldn't help it. "Thank you," she whispered into the mic, "for seeing me, for seeing us." When she stepped off stage, the world felt different. She was swarmed reporters, executives, government officials asking for meetings. But all she looked for was one man, Adrian. He walked toward her slowly, hands in pockets, eyes never leaving hers. They stood in the hallway alone. He didn't speak first. She did. "You let him call me that?" Adrian shrugged, almost shy. "I told him you were someone worth fighting for." Emma laughed, one tear slipping before she could stop it. "You know this doesn't mean we go back to pretending, right? I know, and you're not forgiven." "I don't expect to be." He stepped closer. "But if there's ever a chance, even a small one, that I could try again, not as your boss, not as a CEO, but as a man who finally got it right." She stopped him with a look, not cold, but honest. "I'm not a fairy tale ending, Adrian. I'm not asking for perfect," he said, voice low. "I'm just asking for possible." Silence fell between them. Then she took his hand. Not for the cameras, not for a deal, but because she wanted to. Noah came running in seconds later and wrapped his arms around them both. And for the first time in a long time. Nobody had to pretend. It had been 4 days since the forum. Emma had returned to work like nothing happened, like the world hadn't just watched her pour her heart out on a stage where she was never meant to belong. Emails, meetings, more proposals, just noise. But this morning, something was different. When she stepped into her office, quiet still, the city outside buzzing beyond the glass, she noticed it right away. A white envelope, no name on the front. Just her desk, her nameplate, and that one thing out of place. She frowned, set down her coffee and opened it. Inside, on heavy paper, typed in bold black letters, Position Director of Social Impact Strategy. Full authority, full trust, full budget, no filters. You build it your way. And if you're not too busy being incredible, would you have dinner with me? No suits, no speeches, just us. No contracts. Adrian. Emma didn't cry. She laughed. Just a breath of disbelief and a smile she didn't fight this time. Because he finally got it right. Not the job, she could have demanded that, but the invitation. On her terms. With no expectation, no power play, just possibility. She sat down slowly, still holding the letter. Everything had changed, not because of luck or strategy, but because she dared to be exactly who she was, in a place that had never made space for people like her. And now the space existed. She thought back to the first day she met Adrian, the cold hallway, the sharp command, "You're coming with me." She had rolled her eyes. If only he knew what that would lead to. A fake relationship that unraveled every mask. A little boy who gave her a title no one else had dared say out loud. A job that was never hers. Becoming a mission that was. She stood up, walked to the window. The city looked less intimidating now. The skyline didn't feel so high. Her phone buzzed. Noah. He'd drawn a new picture. 3 stick figures again, but this time one was holding a briefcase. She laughed again, that same warm, unguarded kind. Guess Mommy Emma's got work to do. Later that night, Emma closed up her laptop. She reached into her drawer, pulled out the envelope again, and tucked it into her bag, not for memory, but as a quiet yes. She texted one word. Dinner. Seconds later, a reply popped up. Already got a table. No suits. Just you. As the lights in her office dimmed, the screen faded slowly to black, and just before it disappeared, a single line appeared in white. Sometimes the person who changes the entire company was once the one who just opened the front door. Sometimes the quiet ones change everything. In life, we often overlook the ones who don't speak the loudest, the receptionist, the cleaning staff, the woman in the background. But sometimes those very people carry the greatest ideas, the deepest strength, and the kind of integrity that transforms everything around them. Emma's journey reminds us that titles don't define value. What matters is resilience, purpose, and the courage to walk away from anything that disrespects your worth. She didn't need a stage, she created one. And when the world finally listened, it changed lives. In your own life, never let where you start determine where you finish. Speak up, show up, lead even when no one's watching. And if you're in a position of power, look deeper. The next great leader might be the one who just served your coffee. What would you do if you were given the mic? Drop a comment below. We'd love to hear your story. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that remind us, real power doesn't shout, it shows up.